they didn't hire me again. And I don't know why. I went into the back room and I sat down and I just had this out-of-body experience. I couldn't move my body. I couldn't respond to people speaking to me. My eyes were just locked into the distance. Hello, welcome to another video. There was a video before this one and there will be another video after this one. So today, it's been a while since I made a video like this. Not much has been going on, but today I want to just talk about jobs I've had, right? Employment that I've been under in the past. So I've had a lot of jobs. As you may know, I am currently unemployed. I'm living off of donations on the internet. And that's because the idea of working another job just makes me want to die. It really genuinely just makes me want to die. And it's just not an option for me. There's no mental space for me to even think about the possibility because I have been so burned and traumatized by the jobs that I've had. So my first job was at a call center. I did on-the-job training for 2 weeks, which was basically like we all the new hires went into a class together, basically a room together with computers, and we would all practice our scripts and go over like what the calls were going to be like and what we would be doing. That particular call center job, I was making hotel reservations. So if you ever call a hotel to make the reservation and you have to give them your info and how many rooms you want, how many beds, how many people are going to be there, your credit card, etc. That was me on the other end of the phone inputting all that information into our systems and making the reservation. And that in and of itself wasn't too bad. It was pretty boring. But what was really crushing about it was just the constancy of it. It was just like one call after the other. You don't even get a moment to think in between them. It's just you hang up and immediately you're picking up the next one. And we weren't allowed to hang up on people. If somebody was being weird or unruly or they were taking up too much of our time or something like that, then we would have to call a manager over and have them handle the call and then potentially hang up, because we weren't allowed to hang up on people even if they clearly were not calling to make a hotel reservation. Like there were a few times where people called just to talk or to have some company over the phone, and I'd have to be like, are you gonna make a reservation? And they would be like, let me tell you about my dog. And it was really weird. And then there was one time there was a guy that like he was trying to he was trying to get off. He was trying to jack off on the other end of the line, and he kept telling me about his wife, and I don't know if he really had a wife, but he was like, at first it started like a regular call where I thought he was going to try to make a reservation, and we were even picking a location and everything, and he was like, does this hotel have a gym? Because my wife works out and I really like to see her buttocks while she works out. And he kept saying this, like, my wife loves to work out and I love to watch her work out. Make sure that this hotel has a gym. And I was like, okay, I'll try to find you a hotel that has a gym. And then he was asking me if I work out and if I would work out next to his wife and let him watch. And at this point I called the manager over and I just kept asking him, sir, are you going to be making a reservation? And the manager came over and took over the call, and I don't know what happened after that. But that was crazy. Like, I froze up. That was my first job. I was like 18, 19 years old. I hadn't transitioned yet into male, so I had a female voice and a female name and everything. And, well, actually, I wasn't in the process of transitioning, but they wouldn't let me use my preferred name over the phone. They forced me to use my legal name, which was a whole thing in and of itself. But yeah, that was freaky. That was scary. I didn't enjoy that whatsoever, and I did quit that job after about 4 months because it was just so crushing and emotionally devastating and terrible. I really hated that job. I would go home every day and just eat fast food and be just completely like drained for the rest of the day, even on the weekends. I feel like that was the first job I ever had, and it really set the tone for what employment would be like. So my next couple jobs, I forget exactly what order I did these jobs in. I know that the call center was my first job, and then I was a waiter. I was a waiter at a retirement home. So, retirement homes, they have a dining room for the guests to come in the people that are staying there to come in and order their breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I would work the lunch and dinner shifts at this retirement home, and that was fine. There wasn't really anything specifically wrong with that job. It was just, on your feet all day, and it was very demanding. The people were very demanding, or often very rude and very unruly, and it was interesting because we were seeing the same people over and over again, right? Like a restaurant would have the occasional regular customer, but for us, every customer was a regular customer because it was the same people. The people that lived there were coming in to eat every day. And so there was a lot of like old people drama, like old people like cheating on each other and having all of these cliques. And it was basically like high school, but it was old people because they don't have anything to do with their lives, right? They're just there, they're doing whatever activities the place sets up for them, maybe meeting with their families sometimes, and the rest of the time all they get to do is read and do crosswords and talk to each other. So there was a lot of drama going on, and they try to drag us into the drama sometimes, and it was really awkward. And the reason I left that job is because I had to move. I had to get out of there and leave the area. I was moving to a different state. I didn't particularly enjoy that job. It didn't pay very well at all. It paid the same amount you would expect to be paid doing any kind of waiter job at a restaurant, except we didn't get tips. We weren't allowed to take tips from the guests. So basically I was getting paid peanuts to stand on my feet and walk around and carry heavy hot dishes all over the place and deal with these rude people, these rude old people. So it wasn't ideal, and I didn't keep that job for very long, and I don't think I would do a job like that again. Any kind of customer facing job where I need to be like emotionally on all the time and always masking like that, I don't think I can do another job like that, because the masking element of it, the social element of it, the talking to people and the fake smiles, and I can't do that for 12 hours a day. So another style of job I've had is the warehouse job or the factory job. These are two different jobs I had. They were somewhat similar. I would say the factory was the worst one. These were both temp jobs, right? So I would go to a temp agency and get assigned to a place, and technically I was working for and getting paid through the temp agency, but it was temp to hire, which means that after a certain period of usually about 6 months, the company could hire me away from the temp agency. But they never did. If you ever work for a temp agency and they tell you that the company might hire you if you do a really good job, that's a lie. They're never gonna hire you. They never will. You will be stuck with that temp agency forever, just bouncing from job to job, not knowing what's gonna happen next. So don't work for temp agencies. That's the moral of this story. But I did work for this chip factory in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has like a local brand of potato chips that is really popular, and I worked for their factory bagging their chips, packaging the chips into boxes. And it sucked because I was on my feet all day just standing in the same spot. I didn't even really get to walk around, just contorting my body, moving packages of chips from one spot to the other and folding up the boxes and sending them along. And for 10 hours a day I would do that, just standing in the same spot. And at the time I had sciatica, which is a severe back pain. It's like a pinched disc in my spine that was pinching a nerve and shooting electric pains down my left leg anytime, basically anytime. But standing in the same spot for hours and hours and hours, contorting my body and twisting back and forth, certainly didn't help. I was in a lot of pain. And since I was working for a temp agency, I didn't have health insurance. This job did not give me health insurance. I worked for them for 4 months, and they didn't give me any health insurance. I was working for them full time, no health insurance whatsoever, and I didn't get it through the temp agency either. So I was in a lot of pain with no way to pay for physical training or anything like that to help with the pain. And my job itself was making the pain worse. And so that just completely sucked. That just totally sucked. And then in the end, I ended up leaving that job because they locked me out. They locked me out. Every day I would come in and I would have to get somebody else to open the door for me because there was a keypad and you would need a PIN. They never assigned me a PIN number, so I didn't have my own way to get in. And they saw me, using the employees to help get in. And then they kept saying, like, you can't do that, you're gonna get them in trouble. And then the employees stopped helping me because they were gonna get in trouble for it, but they never gave me a PIN number. They were like, oh, you don't have a PIN? Don't worry about it. We'll have one for you tomorrow morning. And then 2 weeks later, I still don't have one. And I'm asking them every day, how am I gonna get in the building? They were like, okay, come in through the gift shop that's on the side of the building. Tell them at the front counter that you are an employee, that you don't have a PIN, and they'll let you in the back where the warehouse is. So I did that a couple times, but the gift shop closed at 5 p.m. and my shift went until 10 p.m. So after my first cigarette break, I couldn't get back in again. And so I would be banging on the windows trying to get somebody's attention. I would be calling any number that they gave me, and they would always give me automated robots and no way to talk to a person. And so there was no way for me to tell them that I was stuck out here. I was doing my best. And I asked for the PIN repeatedly. They just never gave it to me. And eventually they were like, well, you can't just leave the job if you get locked out. I'm like, I waited out in the cold for an hour and a half, 3 days in a row. I've been asking for this PIN number just to get in the door. Do you guys not want me here? Is that what it is? So eventually they fired me because I was abandoning my post or whatever, but really they weren't letting me in the fucking door. So that was a crazy situation. It was a super painful job. I didn't get paid much for it, and they locked me out and said it was my fault somehow. It didn't make any sense. This is how difficult it is to have a job in this fucking country. So another job I had was a warehouse job. Kind of similar, except instead of just standing in one place, I was moving around using pallet jacks to, move pallets and move things around. It was gardening supplies, was that warehouse. And that was another temp job. They had me moving boxes around and sweeping the floors and cleaning areas and stuff like that. They had me putting labels on boxes and on shelving units and stuff like that. In fact, they had me there for the entire project of expanding the warehouse and adding more shelves. They added 8 new rows of shelves, which I went and labeled, and I used one of those scissor lifts, the thing that lifts people up and brings them down. I used one of those, drove that around and labeled all the shelves, and made one mistake the whole time. I did a great job. I was really fast. They were like, we don't have any more work for you because you finished your job so fast. I guess sweep the floors and everything, and if you want to go home early, then you can. And that's the kind of work that I was doing, where they were really pleased with my progress and how I was doing and how autonomous I was with it. They just had to tell me what to do and I would do it, right? And I rarely had any problems or issues, and finished the work quick, did everything to satisfactory levels. They did not hire me. They were telling me, we're gonna get you forklift trained, we're gonna pay for your certification to get trained on a forklift, and then you can work for us, we'll raise your pay, we'll hire you on permanently, you get the forklift training. They were telling me these things. You're doing great, we're probably gonna hire you and even give you extra training so you can get a better paying job, or better paying position. So I was super excited for that, and I was performing well for them because they were making promises to me. I didn't mind the job. I could listen to my headphones all day and just move the pallets around and do whatever. It wasn't a super bad job. And especially if I'd been trained on forklifts, then I would have been getting a lot of money for that job. But again, it was through a temp agency, and so they had no obligation to hire me on permanently. After the 6 months were over, they didn't hire me again. And I don't know why. I suspect it's because the other employees were always asking me to take my lunch break with them and to socialize with them during the lunch breaks, and instead I would go and eat my lunch alone in my car and have some cigarettes, and that's how I've always done it. I've always preferred to not socialize super well with my coworkers. I don't want to be friends with my coworkers unless we were already friends beforehand. And so I would really prefer to just no distractions, no, extra mental energy spent on the small talk and the niceties and everything. Like, I was nice, I was polite, I wasn't abrasive or anything. I was just quiet and distant, and I guess they didn't like that. I guess they found that it wasn't a great fit for their workplace, even though I was doing my job really well. I was performing really well, so much that they were thinking of training me to do even more work, right? And just because I didn't socialize the way they would prefer, and nobody brought this up, by the way, they would just ask me every lunch break, like, hey, why don't you come eat lunch with us? And I was like, nah, no thank you, I prefer to just do it alone in my car. I didn't see an issue with that. Nobody ever brought it up as like, you're not socializing with your coworkers, and that's why we might not hire you on, like, it just, they never told me a real reason. And when you work for a temp agency, they don't have to, because they technically haven't hired you, so they technically don't have to fire you. All they do to let you go is not hire you, basically. That's how it works with a temp agency. And so that really sucked, because I genuinely enjoyed that job most of the time. At the very least, it was tolerable compared to my other jobs, and just because of some stupid reasons that I don't quite understand, I didn't get hired onto that job, even though they were making promises to me. Another job I had, and this is actually my longest job that I ever had, was a retail job. I worked at Sheetz, which, if you live in this sort of northeastern area of the United States, like New England area, then you might know about Sheetz, you might know about Wawa. Sheetz is really similar to Wawa. It's a gas station convenience store that also has a kitchen where you can get fast food. And yeah, I worked there for 2 years. That job absolutely sucked. I hated that job. I really hated it. Almost every minute that I was there, I hated it. Now, I had a coworker that was also my roommate and a friend at the time, and we had a falling out soon after I quit this job. Things were getting shaky with us, and then we just had a falling out after I quit the job, because I was falling behind on rent and things like that, and I was having an emotional crisis because I had just worked this job for 2 years and didn't really see anything from it. I didn't see any advancement opportunities. I didn't have opportunities to save money, that kind of thing. It just, and then at the house that I lived at with my roommate, his family was also asking me to do more and more housework and more chores and things like that. And his family members didn't really like me. They were sort of bullying me the whole time I was there, and autism problems, basically. But that sort of bled into my work life too, and I just didn't enjoy the job. I would just I would take my weed pen and I would get high the whole time, and that was the only thing that got me through that job, was just getting high the whole time. And the coworkers were fine. It was mostly me and my roommate, and then a couple managers that we cycled through, because we were third shift. That was another aspect of it. Third shift meaning I worked from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. or sometimes 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. because I was a part-time employee. But believe me, part-time does not mean less hours. They still made me work 38 to 39 hours a week, and sometimes they sent me over 40. They were like, you can't do this 2 weeks in a row or we're gonna have to give you benefits. And I was like, I wanted part-time specifically so I could work only maybe 20 hours a week, and you're giving me essentially full-time hours without the full-time benefits. That's the kind of situation that I was in with the hours. And again, I wasn't getting health insurance or dental or anything from this, and I was not getting paid enough to pay my rent, and to have the few things that were keeping me sane and the few enjoyments that I had outside of work. I just wasn't able to save any money, and it absolutely sucked. For 2 years I had that job, and then eventually I just got burned out over time. I just got so burned out. I didn't have any more attendance days that I could take off. I didn't have any more sick days or anything, and I was just having the worst night of my life, and I had a catatonic meltdown. I went into the back room and I sat down, and I just had this out-of-body experience where I couldn't move my body. I couldn't respond to people speaking to me. My eyes were just locked into the distance. I wasn't really looking at anything. and I was just sort of inside my own mind, trapped inside this body that felt so heavy and wasn't moving, just thinking like, can you get up? I need to do my job. I need to get back to work. This is gonna get me fired, right? Like I can't do this. I need to go to work. Like, why am I not able to move? Why can't I move right now? Like, it was a very scary experience, very terrifying experience to be just sort of trapped inside a catatonic body like that. And after about 10 or 15 minutes, I basically just got up and left because my mind couldn't take it anymore. As much as, like, out in the forefront, I was thinking I really need to keep this job so that I can keep paying rent, so that I don't end up homeless again. But I just couldn't do it. And I just walked out and I left, and I never went back to that job. And then things started to fall apart with my roommate and all of this stuff. And then I ended up homeless again. And here we are. So that really sucked. Again, I had that job for 2 years and nothing really came from it. I just got really, really burned out. And that was the last time I really tried in a job. I had a couple jobs after that. I had a job for a couple weeks where I was metalworking in a factory. I was helping make pipes and sewage pieces for like sewage systems and water systems. So, you know, when you flush your toilet, that whole system, wherever that goes, I was making parts for that. And again, I was just emotionally not all there, and I couldn't keep that job for very long. I had another one for another couple weeks, which was housekeeping at a hotel. You know, that didn't pay very well, and it's a tipping job where you're supposed to get tips, but people rarely ever left tips. And the manager was kind of weird. Like, he would say like, oh, I'm so approachable. If you ever have any kind of question whatsoever, just come and ask me. And then I would ask him a question and he'd be like, what do you want? What? Like, really aggressive and mean. And I was just like, okay, I mean, you're a liar. you're a snake-faced liar. Okay. So I didn't stay with that one for very long either. I forgot to mention one of the jobs I had. I think I had this one for like 2 months. This one absolutely sucked. It was a mandatory 60 hours a week, so 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, and with overtime too most of the time. So, but it also didn't pay very well. I paid minimum wage in California, which I think at the time was like $10 and something. But I was also living in my car at the time. And I spent a whole lot of that money that I got on renovating my car and sort of getting used to living in my car, because this was the first job I had after living in my car for the first time. So what the job was is it was creating medical devices. So I was doing laser welding of teeny tiny little microscopic pieces of metal. I would take basically a little tube of metal and weld a coil to it or a spring to it, and these are devices that are used to plug up aneurysms. So if you know what an aneurysm is, it's like a bulge in some kind of vein in your circulatory system, and it can be really dangerous near the heart and especially in the brain. You know, Grant Imahara of the Mythbusters, he actually passed away because of an aneurysm that burst inside his brain. So this is life-saving technology that I was making, and I was getting paid $10 an hour and being super overworked for it, which didn't feel very good. Also, you know, it was a workplace that was full of Vietnamese immigrants. I didn't find any issue with that whatsoever. Most of them didn't speak English well enough for us to communicate and become friends, and so I didn't socialize with my coworkers at all, which is ideal for me, and I didn't think they would see a problem with it either. But after a while it became clear that I was the weird one in the workplace, the odd one out, and, you know, anything that I did, they would talk amongst each other about, you know, how weird it was, even if it was just completely harmless. And the fact that I couldn't really communicate with my coworkers was an issue. And again, this comes down to, like, I can't socialize. And this one wasn't even really my fault or the fault of like having autism or anything. This was like legitimately a language barrier. And it's like, okay, why did you hire me if you knew that I wasn't going to be a fit for the workplace culture? That should have been very obvious from the start if me being white amongst a bunch of Vietnamese people would be an issue because I wouldn't be able to communicate with them. It's not like our job required collaboration. It's not like we needed to speak to each other to get the job done. It was a very individual job. You just sit at your station. In fact, we were discouraged from speaking to each other while we were doing the work. And, there were certain things that I found really nice. Like they would provide lunches. And, a lot of Vietnamese food was just laid out in a buffet and you could get as much as you wanted. So they would cater almost every day. We would get free lunches and I really liked the food. Every day, twice a day, we would all stand up in a group and do this like stretch routine. I really liked that. That was enjoyable. There were certain things about it that I really liked and that I didn't mind, but just because I wasn't allowed to, or I wasn't able to speak to my coworkers that I wasn't allowed to speak to in the first place. My manager, she did speak Vietnamese and English. She was like second generation. So we didn't have any communication issues, and she never had to act as a mediator. I never had any direct issues with any of my coworkers, but she clearly just didn't like me. She just didn't like me. Yeah, we moved to this new facility and got new machines, but the machines were making this like high-pitched whining noise that I could hear. I could hear it really, really strongly, and it was like tinnitus. Nobody else could hear it. I felt like I was going crazy, and I told my manager about it. I was like, can I get earplugs or something? She was like, yeah, you can bring earplugs, but because this is a sterile environment, you're going to have to sterilize the earplugs. It's going to be a whole thing. And she was clearly like not very happy about having to do whatever paperwork was involved with me having earplugs in the clean room. It was just, I just didn't fit in there. It also didn't pay well enough for the hours and the work that I was actually doing. It's not like it was difficult work. It was somewhat skilled, right? I did have to be trained on, where to aim and how to use the equipment and everything and how to maneuver everything with the little tweezers. It's not like it was difficult though. But the thing is, it was just another shitty job where nobody liked me, and I didn't like anybody particularly either. I didn't really enjoy the work, and it just wasn't worth it. Now, the last job I want to talk about, this is when I was living in my car in LA. This was the first couple years that I was homeless, and I was trying to figure things out. I lived in and around LA, and I did Postmates. I tried to apply for DoorDash and all the other ones too, but they wouldn't, even though I wanted to ride a bike, they wouldn't let me sign up without like a valid driver's license, and I didn't have that at the time. So, or without like a clean driving record. I can't remember exactly what it was, but only Postmates allowed me to sign up for it. And at first I was doing it with my car for a little while, and then I got an electric bike, and in a fridge bag, like a cooler bag that I could put the food in. And I got some little candies and little Post-it notes and a pen, and I would write, enjoy your meal, and tape a little mint or a candy to the bag, and I would just deliver food, through Postmates, through the Postmates app. And it was okay. It was, again, not a whole lot of money. I think I would have been more successful if I had the multiple apps to work with, but I only had the one. And it was genuinely an enjoyable job. Again, I could just listen to my headphones. I could just bike around the city with my electric bike and, deliver food and listen to music or podcasts or whatever. I would deliver in like rain and in really bad weather conditions, and people would give me extra tips for that. And I was good at the job too. I was fast, I was efficient. And again, I always put a little candy and a little note saying, enjoy your meal. So people, it was a good job for me. I was making my own hours, making my own time, and doing it when I wanted to. The problem was that since I was living in my car, I didn't have a reliable place to charge my bike's battery. And as soon as the battery ran out, that was the end of the workday for me, because that bike was like 80 pounds, and without the battery, it's not a normal bike. It's not like I could just keep biking it like a normal bike after the battery runs out, especially in the hills of LA. So the only problem with that is that I was having trouble keeping my thing charged. It took about 3 or 4 hours to charge up to full with a regular outlet, and I didn't have any adapter in my car for that, and I just kept getting kicked out of places because I was trying to stay too long and charge up my battery. Actually, one time I left the battery at a library because I really, really needed some cash that day. I was crunched for time, but I had some errands to run, and I left my battery at a library plugged into the wall, and when I got back, they had confiscated it. They had cut my lock, which was like $30, and they said, "We thought it was a bomb. You can't come here anymore." And so I got kicked out of the library, banned from the library because they thought I put a bomb, which I guess I kind of understand, but like, that really, really screwed me over. And I didn't know that they were gonna think it was a bomb. It's just a big battery. It has like the plug is plugged into the wall. Like, I don't understand. I was really frustrated with that. And they were like, "We thought it was a bomb threat. We were gonna call them." They were like really freaking out about this battery that was plugged into their wall. But you know, that kind of screwed me over that day, and I ended up not getting the money that I needed to get through the day, and I was really frustrated. And again, my battery wasn't charged because they cut it out of the wall like 2 minutes after I left. And so, you know, I was just really frustrated with that. And eventually I ended up moving away from LA, and I'm not going to be doing car life in a city ever again. So unfortunately, unless I want to commute to the city, doing Postmates or DoorDash or anything like that, that's not really an option because it's not available out here in the suburbs and in the rural areas. So I really enjoyed that job. It made okay money. It was enough to keep me going as long as I was consistent with it and made the right hours. But you know, that's probably the job that I enjoyed the most out of any that I've had. Just, you know, riding around on my bike delivering food and stuff for maybe 5-6 hours a day, maybe 8 if I was really strapped. I could take my breaks whenever I wanted. I could smoke a cigarette while I was riding the bike. You know, it was nice. I didn't hate that job. It's just, it was really difficult on the logistics side because I had to charge that battery and everything. And then I ended up moving away from the city, and now I can't really do it anymore. Yeah, those are the jobs I've had. I've had warehouse, I've had factory, I've had retail, food service, call center, you know, delivery driver, pretty much every entry-level job there is, except for something maybe like a data entry or like a security guard type of job. And I've applied for those types of jobs too, and I never got them. But this is just a little proof for anybody that thinks that I'm just lazy, unemployed bum, right, that has never had a job or isn't willing to work or whatever. You know, I've had jobs. I just they all mistreated me, or none of them really worked out the way that would make it worth it, right? And you know, it's not like I have a ton of money now. I still struggle even to have enough money to eat and keep the gas in my car some days. In fact, probably more often than not, I'm struggling with money still. But at the very least, I have the space mentally and emotionally to process my situation and to sort of deal with it without really having to worry about labor and work and hours of you know, making money and all of this stuff. It's just a lot to deal with when you're working a job of any kind and it's not providing you with the safety and security and finances that you need it to, and then you still have to work that job and put in all of that effort. At this point, it's not like I have job money. I'm not getting as much money as I would if I was employed even part-time through these donations. Sometimes I get a generous person giving me, you know, a whole lot of money, and I can sort of coast on that for a week or two. But other than that, I still struggle a lot financially. So it's not like this is like easier financially speaking to live off of donations rather than working a job. But in terms of like my spiritual and emotional well-being, this is really the only way I can rest and the only way I can continue. The idea of getting another job, especially in the market the way it is now, absolutely terrifies me. Like I could not do it, right? I've had social workers try to be there with me while I'm applying for jobs and stuff like that, And they've seen me just devolve into a panic attack just looking at like Indeed.com and things like that. It's just not, it's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen because I've worked these jobs and it's just never, ever been worth it. And so even though I don't have really enough money still, this is still better than the alternative. This is still better than going back into that world of burnout and frustration and all of these social cues that I miss, and people, you know, I do a great job. I put my all into it, and then I just like don't get rewarded for it because I didn't socialize well enough or something like that. You know, I'm just tired of that frustration. I'm tired of living in that world, and I'm not going to do it anymore. So that's where I'm at. It's not like I want to live on donations for the rest of my life. I would like to put in some kind of work for something, but I worked these jobs for, you know, 8-10 years, something like that, and I just got so burned out. That like I really need to rest. I need some safety and security for like a good few months, maybe even a year, before I could even consider genuinely dedicating myself to any kind of job. There's little things I can do here and there, like make videos, but at the moment, dedicating myself even 20 hours a week to a job would just drain me so bad. I would just be exhausted by the end of it. I would be exhausted by the thought of it, and I'm not exaggerating. This is genuine. It's very difficult to describe what autistic burnout is like, but having gone through all these jobs, having tried so many different styles of work and things that are available to me, I kind of know what I like and don't like. The thing is, just none of them pay well enough. None of them pay well enough to be worth the effort and the labor that goes into it. So when an opportunity comes up for me to get back into the economy, when the economy is better, maybe when we're not facing the second Great Depression, then I'll consider, you know, probably doing like a delivery job again, like Postmates or maybe a warehouse. Maybe I can get a forklift certification. Something like that would be great. That's the kind of job that I would enjoy. It's just that none of them are available that pay well enough and give the benefits that I need. None of them are worth it. It's just straight up, none of them are worth it. Are you employed? Are you unemployed? What kind of jobs have you had? If you had similar experiences, do you relate to any of this? Let us know in the comments. Be sure to like the video if you liked it, sub to the channel if you're interested in more like this. I do live in my car, and like I said, I live on donations at the moment, so there will be links for that in the description below. And thank you so much for watching, and have a peaceful day.